Thanks for being here. I'm glad that many of you made the first meeting too, or said the representative. Yeah, good. So I'm going to try to time these things around, and I am so glad that we got together today. We're getting together today, and we are starting to work with mission analytics. Thanks to First Five for the support of the five. Thank you so much, team. And our gratitude there to the team. Today we are going to get an overview about all the elements of the pilot plan, including timeline and next steps with mission analytics. We have here with us Aloha, that she's from the team of mission analytics, and Peggy, who is the director of CEO. She's on the line at social media, and she's going to be our speaker for today. So I think that I don't know if Peggy can hear us. Can you hear us, Peggy?
When you're close, I can hear you. When you want it all away, it's a little faint.
I know, yeah. So we are using the cell phone. That's why she cannot hear us. So we will have to repeat questions or comments for Peggy, but only to let her know who is in the room. So we have, and I'm going to speak because I'm close to the microphone. So we have Diana from Family Children Services, Solano Family Children Services. We have Manuela from Valeo Unified School District. And then we have Christy from Solano Community College, and Kathy, she's the ED of the Solano Family and Children's Services. That's the R&R here in Solano. And we have Stephanie Wheeler, also a contractor, CSPP contractor, CSPP. We have Juan and April. They are from Child Start. And we have Lisa from Solano County Office of Education, Juanita from First Five, and Aloka, and me. So thank you, Peggy, for joining us remotely. I will basically let you do the show now on.
Well, actually, why don't you go ahead and let me see if I can figure out how to advance this. Do you want to go ahead and talk through the timelines, since a lot of this is your process?
Okay, good. So basically, since we met last, that was part of the LPC meeting, something changed in terms of, based on some comments that we got from you and other counties too. I am part of a group of LPC coordinators for the new pilot county that has been connecting through conference calls pretty much weekly, try to figure out how this process is going to be implemented. And one of the things about the streamlining that the governor's office, the state is trying to do with this process of pilots, they state that the contract will be able to be changed only for the new fiscal year of the contract. So before the pilot, and please correct if I'm wrong, Peggy, but before the pilot, when you had your pilot accepted, your pilot plan accepted by CGE, if your contract was in the middle of the year, your contractors, you could basically change the contract in the middle of the year. Now on, the idea is that to streamline the process, the change will be implemented only in the new fiscal year. But if the new fiscal year now is going to be 18, 19, and if we submit our plan after the fiscal year starts, it's going to be very confusing, and we will not be able to implement this change for this fiscal year. So all the new pilot counties, we are basically adopting a new timeline that is, instead of having as a deadline August 1st, as first we had been discussing with CDE, the deadline will be for us to submit the plans to CDE will be May 1st. So it will give CDE time to review the plan and implement it, accept them, make them formal for the counties, and then the change will come for the new fiscal year of 18-19 for all the contracts. So this means that, so we are basically going to start to meet with contractors to review pilot components and assess commitment to participate. So basically we are, instead of having, I even sent you a kind of a pre-agreement with the invitation to this meeting, but only for the release of the data from your contract. But actually, because of the new timeline, we are going to go full with the participant agreement that will have the components already on the participant agreement. So we are going to be meeting with you, and then we are going to be developing the pilot according to the components you agreed to embrace for your program and for Solano during this month. Pilot plan, it will be shared with you, the ad hoc committee, by March 1st. This meeting for the quality counts that we had planned to be after, our ad hoc committee would meet after the meeting. Unfortunately, the meeting for the quality counts will be March 13th, and our LPC meeting is already March 15th. So there would not be time for them to update and give the review to the LPC for the LPC to approve. So basically, the idea is that we will meet on the during the week of March 5th. We'll meet as pilot plan ad hoc committee to give already feedback to about the plan, any change that we want to make, and then in order to be submitted on time to the LPC. So we are going to meet on March 6th. And then we can see if we need to meet in person or it will be a web meeting. We can decide together. And then we are going to have the LPC reviewing and March 15th approving, hopefully, the plan March 15th in order to be submitted to the board supervisors in an April meeting for approval. And then by May 1st to be with CDE already. So we have a very tight timeline, but with the expertise of Mission Analytics and with the cooperation of all of us, of you, we will be able to make it happen, especially because this is a process that other counties already passed through, and hopefully we'll be able to fast track this with Solano, because it's based on regulations, so there is not much we can change at this point. And based on the streamlined process that the state is adopting, we will be able to amend the plan in the future, including to look at our reimbursement rate for the second year moving forward. So every year we'll be able to consider making any change we want, and so not any, but some change. And then we will be able to do that in the future. But for now, I think if we follow what others already did and get the big change that we want for our families to qualify and for our contracts to be managed in a more streamlined way, I think that we will get a lot of benefits from that. So with that, I think we cover everything about the timeline, Peggy.
Yep, I'll take it back.
Okay.
So one of the elements that Erica didn't really lay out so much is one strategy that CDE has really encouraged as a way of getting through all of these plans that are going to come in kind of at once, is for them to be as consistent as possible and to draw as much as possible on existing components. So the list of components here are those that were in the Santa Clara County Plan, which has recently been approved. Santa Clara is still waiting on its pilot rates, and really the pilot rates are a more difficult process. It's a more elaborate, authorization. It's a bigger change to the contracts, and essentially the agreement with CDE now is by separating the two, we can move quickly on all of the eligibility pieces and then leave the pilot rate as a second round. So that's the strategy that Solano is looking at right now. So I'm going to talk through each of these components kind of quickly to let you know what they are and sort of the basic concept, and then we can go into more detail as necessary. I should say there's a lot of materials now from the different counties in terms of implementing these, and Alok and I are actually not necessarily the experts on all of the implementation pieces. We're more about kind of the rules of the plan and the pilot rate calculations. But there's a lot of existing information now that Solano County will be able to draw on in terms of how to actually put these into process. All right, so the first piece, to start with the first several. So a lot of these started, especially in San Mateo and San Francisco, which were the first two, with the idea of increasing the income threshold for eligibility to what is the maximum allowable by the federal government, which is 85% of the state median income. As you know, in the last budget year, the state finally went up to that threshold itself. So we're actually statewide, the exit eligibility is now the maximum that's allowed by the federal government. So that aspect, the pilot doesn't affect very much anymore, but what it does affect is the initial eligibility. So we're proposing that the Solano pilot would allow for the same income threshold for both initial eligibility and exit eligibility, which is to say you wouldn't have to meet the old standard at the beginning. You could be higher income as long as you were under the overall threshold. Thanks to Alameda, the pilots now have 24-month eligibility for families entering subsidized care, except for if the need is based on job search. So we are proposing to include that for Solano as well. The job search eligibility would be a 12-month authorization if the only need is seeking employment. And this is a case where there's a lot of the details about how to implement this actually laid out by the different counties. Any sort of high-level questions on these pieces before I go on?
Hi, this is Diana from Solano, Family and Children's Services. So for job search, our existing eligibility is already 12 months. So how would this be different?
My understanding was existing was 6 months.
That just changed July 1st with the new 12-month eligibility.
Okay. Well, so anything, you'll see there's other pieces that kind of the state changes have overtaken. So, to the degree that the state has already allowed for it, we can drop it from the plan. But my understanding was that it was 12 months in general and 6 months for the job search. But I am willing to double check that. All right, well, let me continue to the other pieces. So similar to the issue of the length of eligibility, one example of a piece that's not currently relevant is the ability to set a family fee schedule for any families that are above the state eligibility cutoff. So that is not currently relevant because the state eligibility cutoff is currently the maximum that's possible. And one of the requirements of the legislation is that no families are harmed. So any family that's eligible now continues to be eligible and doesn't have any higher fee under the pilots than they would in the absence of the pilot. So the family fee, having an alternate family fee schedule only applies in the future if the federal government threshold goes up and the state doesn't keep up. As we know, historically, the state has jumped and then not increased it the following years. So if the federal threshold goes up, but the state doesn't, then we can have a family fee schedule that would cover that difference. And the pilot could continue to increase the income eligibility and have family fees that match it. One of the pieces that was also new in Alameda that has now been shared in the other counties is this shift back to the age 2.9 for CSPP. You know, one of the perceptions was that it was very challenging to manage enrollment in CSPP, especially CSPP versus CTTR, with the children who would not be in the preschool age category at the beginning of this school year. So this is allowing the age 2.9 children to be in the preschool contract. So essentially, in the school year that they turn 3, they'll be able to be on the CSPP, which then obviously allows the transition the following year to transitional kindergarten. And then just another sort of cleanup component is allowing the 6.5 service hours for families seeking housing or seeking employment. So another case where the state had changed and reduced service hours a little bit that could be allowed, and the pilots have sort of pushed that back up to what was historical. So I will pause there for questions. Should I go ahead?
Well, right now for us it is called a minute. This increases less than 30 hours, right? 6.5 hours. Okay, clarified here, or do you have a question? No, we're just clarifying the change. Okay. That currently they have to have less than 30 hours a week, 29 hours a week. Mm-hmm.
Right, so it's sort of the difference between a 6-hour day, 5 days a week versus 6.5, 5 days a week.
Right. Mm-hmm. Erica, the 2.9, is that by September 1st, or is that by? Do you know if the 2.9 is by September 1st?
I think it's September 1st, yeah. Loca, do you remember exactly?
Actually, December 1st. I have here the table that was shared by CGE, Peggy, and then they have December 1st for San Mateo, Alameda, and San Francisco. So it's December 1st. Yeah? Pretty sure it's December 1st. Because that would have changed. Yeah, I believe we changed December 1st and not December 1st. I'm not sure why. It was distributed by the CGE, but anyway, it's something to be clarified. But okay. So currently it's what? It's currently September 1st, which matches the K-12. So, okay. So I'm sorry. I should clarify. So it's December 1st, so that it's when they enter like CK. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's a line of the CK. Yeah. Did you hear that, Maggie? So then
no.
They could have preschool and CK and coaching them, so they would have to sit out. Clarify. Thanks, Maggie.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was looking just now at the same table that you were looking at, and it's really, the current state definition is at the time that the child turns 3, and so this is having the child turn 3 by December 2nd, which makes you 2.9 3 months earlier. Okay, so let me go forward. I just wanted to flag you, there have been some other pieces that have been floated over time or have been allowed in some counties and not in other counties. So, and some of these we've pushed a little bit and, you know, may be able to get some changes over time. But in Alameda and San Francisco County, there were high rate districts that had higher reimbursement rates but couldn't get the adjustment factors. And so in Alameda and San Francisco, the high rate districts were allowed to get the adjustment factors. That was not authorized for Santa Clara County. Similarly, Alameda was able to get a sibling preference. So allowing contractors to give preference to siblings of children already enrolled in the program as opposed to take the highest priority children. And so that's in Alameda. That has, the other earlier pilot counties have requested that and were not allowed to do it, and that was not accepted for Santa Clara.
Yeah, actually, CGE said at our last call that it would not be accepted anymore, no priorities. It was kind of oversight from their part that they accept for one county. They admitted it's on record, but it's like they are not allowing priorities, not allowed.
Yeah, and the third one here, this 2-year contract, you know, the idea would be allowing contracts to be 2-year contracts instead of having to be renegotiated every year, so that you'd have more sort of consistency and expectation. So this was proposed by Santa Clara but not accepted by CDE. And this third one is an example. You know, we had, I think particularly with Santa Clara, we had this conversation with CDE that did not exactly follow the legislation. The legislation clearly does allow for things like changes in the term of the contracts. I think there's argument that the legislation would allow for the adjustment factors as well. However, CDE sort of said no and held things up. So it was a matter of, you know, are you going to fight and say, well, the legislation allows this, or, you know, leave that battle for another day. So that's why sort of this idea of going with the things that we know CDE will not complain about as much as a first pass, and then if counties want to look for other innovations later, or look for other strategies, that those might be done by modification. So, you know, in a sense, some of these things in Santa Clara, they didn't approve the eligibility changes because they were arguing about all these other pieces they didn't want to go through. So, you know, contractors couldn't enroll children they would otherwise have enrolled while we were sort of arguing with the state. So that's why it's sort of the strategy of let's not argue, let's get something in place and then look for modifications afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So Manuela, your comment was?
So on one of your pages, you stated that when we enroll the family, and so there is sibling priority.
Did you hear that, Jackie?
I think you said that when you enroll a family, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's true at the beginning, right? Because the priority is at the family level. But if you think about a case where you have, say, only a CSPP program and you have a younger sibling coming in, so they're not going to get enrolled at the same time. The idea is you could not give a preference then to that sibling over a lower income family that is otherwise looking for care.
That's not what you said. There is clear priority of 4-year-olds over 3-year-olds. If you have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, would that bump out another 4-year-old? So definitely have to get clarification. So priority. So I recall that would.
So, but the idea is that so in our plan. So we would need clarification if we can include sibling preference or not.
I would assume that you cannot include sibling preference. Yeah. So basically, yeah. And I think this goes under the category of not allowing, not disadvantaging existing families.
Okay. And then what's
so these are all things that I think you won't have in your plan, but you might hear, either have been considered or have been in other counties' plans.
Okay, so we don't include now, we don't include in the plan, but curious about the regulation. Okay. Yeah.
I did not hear that, Erica, if you want to repeat it.
Yeah, go ahead and move forward. We can basically have conversations throughout this process, we can have conversations, clarify the existing regulations, but yeah, we don't include the sibling preference.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the open issues is the treatment of the families under vouchers. One thing to remember pretty importantly, that reimbursement rates for vouchers would not be affected by the pilot, but the counties, and this is one of the pieces of the legislation and a bunch of the amendments that went in for the existing pilot counties, is how to handle the AP families. So at county option, you can extend the eligibility criteria to the voucher program. And we didn't list the CalWORks Stage 1 here, and that's kind of its own set of criteria and requires the involvement of the Department of Social Services to have that. And this is another piece that is under consideration for amendments, what that role would be. But the San Mateo and San Francisco essentially had Stage 2, 3, and the CAP programs under the same eligibility criteria that was disallowed in Alameda and then has been basically reauthorized by the amendments. Should I continue?
Any questions? No? Fine. Okay. Yeah, if you could please.
Okay. So Erica mentioned this issue of participation letters. So I wanted to just walk through what it means to agree to be a pilot contractor. So essentially the elements that I was just describing as pilot elements would become contract terms. So they would be the criteria against which, if the state was going to audit, they would look for, are you following these expanded rules for eligibility for your families? So you're accepting those changes in eligibility as terms of the contract. If relevant, and as I said, it wouldn't be currently, you'd use the family fee schedule. One of the things that we'll be pushing for particularly is that the pilot participants either provide or, by preference, authorize CDE to release data on earnings, enrollment, and family characteristics. The family characteristics here being the monthly 801A reporting, which allows us to see the income level of families that are participating. For example, the age groups and how that's varying over time, which is for evaluation and reporting and understanding the impact of the pilot. What we have done, particularly both for getting annual report information, but also to establish the pilot rates, is we've tended to collect 9500s and similar documentation that you guys submit to the state, and we get those forms and we data enter, and then we use that information. Finally, late in the process with Santa Clara, the state just started giving us that data. So what we would like to do is have that up front where you guys don't have to send us the form, we don't have to data enter it, the state just gives us the data. But we'll be putting language into participation agreements that say, you know, in doing this we authorize, you know, and this would obviously be under confidentiality and you know, appropriate use. So it wouldn't be public release of data. But that feeds into the next point, which is to assist in annual reporting. And then if you're a chronic under-earner, to agree to amend your contracts, this would be temporary for the life of the pilot, to allow those under-earnings to go into either increased enrollment someplace else or higher pilot rates. And then finally, to facilitate temporary transfers, the pilots have a little bit more flexibility in terms of the number of times a year that they can do transfers. So about some things to know about pilot participation, and these are, the first one here is still under discussion with the state, but the rule from the state has been that you can only opt in at the beginning of the pilot. So if you're ever going to be a pilot contractor, you have to be in at the beginning. You can opt out at any time, but you can't go in and out. And part of this is to have a consistent set of rules as much as possible, but also, you know, if we're going to be using under earnings for increased pilot rates, it's important to have a consistent set of contractors involved. Now, one thing I want to underscore that I realized belatedly in Santa Clara that not everybody understood. So you don't have to give up funds to participate in the pilot. I mean, there are going to be contractors in every county that are fully earning, and the county has to increase the total enrollment. So if you're fully earning, we need you to keep fully earning and not to give up funds. If you're under earning, then we want to have the contractors give up funds temporarily to the pilot that can be redirected partly to increase enrollment somewhere else and partly to increase the reimbursement rates. And part of the reason to delay the change in the reimbursement rates a year is to see what the impact of all these other changes are on enrollment. So we know it's hard to guess how much some of these changes are going to matter for getting families in consistently. We're under a new fee schedule, new income criteria right now, and it may be that historically what your under earning looks like isn't what it would look like with these new rules. So that's why we're postponing the reimbursement rate decision, but it's also a case where we just want to make sure that people understand you don't have to be putting in the pool to be part of the pilot, but if nobody puts into the pool, then nobody gets an increased reimbursement rate. So that's just an important piece to know. And that's what I have, unless we want to go into more depth on any of these issues.
Oh, the transferring, is that from one contractor to another? And that's
yeah, so the temporary transfers, so one of the things that the pilots have done is have a little bit more control over monitoring sort of the transfer process. And for example, one of the things that we've done in Santa Clara, and these rates aren't approved yet because actually what's going on right now is the state is putting up an offer for a contract that was relinquished, and the rest of the contractors are waiting to see if there's no takers for that contract, then the dollars will go into higher pilot rates. So the contractors decided to wait and see on that. But what we're doing in Santa Clara, sorry, there's a lot of noise outside here, is actually, you know, we're leaving a buffer that we think may be needed to cover some of the contracts. There's contracts that were historically over-earning, but with the reduced family fees, we don't know if they're going to continue to over-earn. so we had other contractors that were giving up funds. So, but rather than give money to increase a contract that was already over-earning, we left the money with the contractor who was giving up the funds, with the idea that there would be a temporary transfer if needed. So essentially, the contractor who was giving up the funds had the first claim on those dollars. But if they didn't use them, then we were setting up so the transfer would go to another contractor. You can see I'm also saving, you know, several hours of discussion and explanation by the fact that we're punting for now on the pilot rates, because that is the most complicated piece.
So my question is the term temporarily. So it's really just that contract. Once you start a new contract year.
Did you hear that, Peggy?
No, can you repeat the question?
Okay, I'll try. So the term temporarily, like the release of funds,
Yep.
giving up funds temporarily, is during that fiscal year for that contract, and then the new contract for the new year will come with the same amount. That's what it's for?
Yeah, so there's two kinds of transfers under this. One is the new terms once we establish the pilot rate. So when we establish a pilot rate, we give the state a new child days of enrollment and a total maximum reimbursable amount for each of the contracts. And that becomes the base terms for the contracts throughout the pilot. But those temporary transfers, you know, this happens now, right, where you can have a contract that has money left at the end of the year, have money shifted from that temporarily to a contract that doesn't have money for the end of the year. And that doesn't affect the underlying contract. So if those temporary transfers are done, that usually means the contract is the same the following year as it was the previous year. Right, so it's a transfer of the funds, but it's not a change of the contract, essentially.
And this pretty much allows contractors to transfer funds at any point in their contract year instead of those months that were set up by November and May, or not very helpful months.
Yeah.
It's not really any time. It used to be literally any time you could do it. So actually, before the pilot started, you couldn't do it at all. These transfers were actually introduced under the pilots and then were put for just the 2 time periods. And just from a sort of things being orderly, it's really maybe 3 time periods under the pilot. Partly because you don't really know that much. You don't have that much more information, really, to do that much more often. But it's a little extra flexibility. And I would say, you know, the decision is more in the hands of the pilot than in the state on those transfers.
Hi, it's Diana again. So my question is from an AP perspective, 24-month eligibility. Is it an all or nothing with this? I mean, if we go into this, we have to approve up to 12 or through 24 months of eligibility, like we do now, 12 months? Are we obligated, or is it optional?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm really sympathetic because, you know, you guys have a fixed pot of money, and anybody who's sitting in it for 24 months instead of 12 months is potentially using, you know, is preventing another family from coming in. So I think that's something we could explore with CDE, and it might be worth kind of a side conversation. Erica, might also be something to take up with the other county group.
What my understanding is not optional. It's like 24, and then that my understanding, but maybe I'm wrong, and that if they even like state for you to not contact the, like you cannot even approach the family about their situation during that time. If they come to you and say we don't need anymore, is one thing, but you cannot.
So right now, that is wait 12 months eligibility.
Yeah, what I'm not sure, and Erica, you're right in terms of how the 24-month would work. What I'm not sure about is, you know, could the county have a different threshold for the AP programs than it did? We know that the AP programs can be excluded. The question is, can they be partially included in the plan? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, so I don't know.
So another question on that, like my firm, school year program, they're off, and then for 2.5 months, and then they re-enroll. Hopefully they don't spring, but they re-enroll. So would we not be re-enrolling, or is this only for continuous enrollment program? 24 months.
Did you hear that, Peggy?
No.
Okay, so for Stephanie was asking, her program is a school year program, and the kids are off for 2 months, and then they start the new year, and then they enroll them again. So do this 24 months only apply for programs that are year long, or that would apply for her too? But
my assumption is that it applies for her too. That that sort of the eligibility would continue. Even if you had sort of a subsequent year, you could have families that would change from one classroom to another that may have a different process. And my interpretation is that yes, it would apply.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those pilot programs, are there school district contractors?
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
College contractors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
And some things too on that we would need to know, because we have to maintain a separate student file for a student here.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot would have to change.
Yeah.
That really impacts a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
I understand and appreciate you not having to financially qualify
Yeah.
for 2 years, but the rest of it, I need the immunizations that need to be updated. There's a lot of things that need to be updated. Yeah.
It's only the financial.
Right, and would we have one student record, like if we're audited, would CDE go, I feel great about this, or where the heck is the record?
Mm-hmm.
So there's some fine point to it. You only do one? You only do one? Yeah. Oh, we do everything. No.
So there is there are conversations here, Peggy, about, because they have to maintain many records of documents of the students and renew them every year, not only about financial situation of the family, but about other things. And then that could impact their records. But they exchange information here. But we can get some information from other pilot counties and see how they, let's see how it works.
And I think not Santa Clara, but the other 3 pilot counties have, bridged a summer with this rule already, so they should know.
Mhm. Okay.
Other questions?
It's already 4:30, so any final questions? Maybe we could talk about next steps. Okay.
So
Go ahead, Peggy.
I was going to say, the next steps from our side is ALOCA is going to be, pulling all there's a whole needs assessment portion of the pilot plan that's required, and there's specific data elements that are required for that. And ALOCA and her team are going to be pulling that, and then structuring these plan components into the plan for Solano, subject to any changes that you guys want in that. And then in parallel, we'll also be taking a look at the draft language for the participation letters, sharing that back with Erica for her to get you all to sign, because that, you know, the count of the official participants is one of the aspects that CDE also looks at in this plan. Erica, anything I missed?
While we get the clarification for the questions that you had. One, the main questions here are the, I think the school district, how they manage that. I think the main questions from the group, like what would impede you to sign the participant agreement? Would be to know about the 24 for the school district. What? Okay, how to manage when they have academic calendars. What else? What other questions that you have from the whole presentation that you say, I'm not sure about signing this participant agreement? Oh, 24 for AP, that option, you know. I'll look at you. No, okay. Because I need to clarify that, yeah.
And then since there's only 2 people in my district that can sign anything like this, something that I can present to the superintendent. So that's the one to get.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Some counties are getting a letter from the superintendent of schools. In this case, it will be Lizette. In support, like after she sees and review in support of it. Would that help for you?
That would be super helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I can
Okay, to have a letter from her. Okay, good. So we will get that. We'll work on that. So any other concerns? Any other reservations? I'm just wondering what Yeah, I have seen writing that I was going over the list to see who's represented. I think that the only one that's not represented, because we have basically 6 contractors, is the Circle one. Because the other ones are pretty much represented. June, yeah, June is sick. She sent me an email, and I will share the recording with her. But she came to the LPC meeting. She's interested. She has been a part of the process. Yeah, I think that's it because, yeah, that's it. So, yeah, Rose, exactly. Yeah, I'll definitely reach out. Yeah, I'll be reaching out together. So that's it, and we are already on February 13th. So we have to hurry up to get these things done. And if you need to include, you have a board that you need to include on the agenda, this participation agreement, please be aware of that. Try to schedule and put on the agenda if you have a board that you need to approve. I can work with you on that. The participation agreement is probably going to look pretty much similar to the Santa Clara one. Is that right, Peggy?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to double check and look with some new eyes, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It shouldn't have any surprises.
Reimbursement rate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the issue of the reimbursement rates is a kind of a concern. And one thing that Matilda from Fresno shared with us is that they put the language there to the participation agreement to kind of like emphasize the importance of sharing data. It's kind of like if you don't follow the agreement, you will be excluded from the plan. Kind of a punishment, not punishment, but because sometimes people sign and then don't follow. So maybe we can consider something like that. But she sent me and I'll forward that to you. So with that, I think that our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Aloka, for being here and working with us. Thanks again to First Five for your support for this